I have been searching.
Welcome to Following the Fire. Thanks for joining us on this journey through the wilderness. Just like Israel followed the pillar of fire and smoke, we want to take a new look at our beliefs and just follow him.
And like Israel, we get it wrong a lot, we get lost a lot, but we're doing our best to go where God leads us. I'm Nathan.
And I'm Steve.
Don't you know it's all I have?
Today, we have a little bit of fun with a Denomination Personality Quiz. Stick around to the end and you get to hear Steve's letter, the Dear John breakup letter to our congregation. And in the meantime, we talk about the emotions of this in-between space, community or lack thereof, and I discover weird Christian Twitter.
I thought you wanted me to win, but you only wanted love.
So I've been feeling kind of better and better as the sun, I think, has been out longer and longer. Just my general mood has been better.
That's good.
Which means I'm starting to see all of the messes in my house that I didn't have mental capacity for before. And I finally got to my office, and I've had this pile of books in my bedroom that are books that I want to read.
Yeah.
So I thought, man, it's kind of stressful every time I see the pile, and it seems daunting, and so I just don't read any of them. So I decided to move them into a special place in my office, like I want to read these, but I haven't read them yet, because I'm not about to put a book I haven't read on my bookshelf. That seems wrong. So as I was doing that, I started to find a lot of books with bookmarks in them, and so I was like, well, I guess I should make a pile of books that I am currently reading. And I should try to force... So it turns out I am reading 15 books. And that makes me seem like I'm someone who reads a lot of books, but I am not. I have finished like 4 books this year.
Yeah.
So I just kept on adding to that list. So I'm going to take something useful from Dave Ramsey, and do the snowball method, only apply it to books, and just look at where the bookmark is, pick the book with the bookmark closest to the end, and just start trying to reduce those down to a manageable level. But
I've got the same pile of books on my desk, and the problem is there's other stuff around the house that ends up, at least my family thinks, belongs in my office. And so on top of this pile of like 10 books is now a couple Bibles and a couple other books and a journal and a box from Amazon. And it's embarrassingly high. And now I can't even see the books.
That's funny.
So speaking of books, you want to talk about the next book club book?
Yes. So I keep hearing a lot about this book, and I think we both kind of decided it was time. We're trying to cycle through topics a little bit, so I guess just not have two that are extremely similar back to back. So we decided on Jesus and John Wayne. The subtitle is How White Evangelicals Corrupted a Faith and Fractured a Nation. Wow. So
it's pretty intense.
It's intense, yeah. I like Jesus and John Wayne better. I can get behind both of those. I don't know about the rest of that. It's by Kristen Dumais, and it came out recently. I'm pretty sure it came out in 2020.
Yeah.
I pre-ordered the soft cover, so it's coming out this month. And it just seems like a very timely book.
Yeah, looking at on the back of the book, the back of it says, "A scholar of American Christianity presents a 75-year history of evangelicalism, identifying the forces that have turned Donald Trump into a hero of the religious right."
Oh, I didn't know the Don was in it. I'm a little nervous because one thing that I've seen as people's reactions to this book is like deep frustration.
Yeah.
Or like I just finished this book. I am not okay, but I'm glad I read it. So I'm a little nervous, but I think this is, if that's what it's about, that has been driving a lot of conversations and thought. So definitely interested to see where that goes.
And that will be coming out July 7th, just in time for just after an Independence Day.
There you go. Jesus' birthday, right? Is that what we're celebrating?
There's a fantastic song, by the way, by Iron and Wine called Jesus the Mexican Boy.
Yeah.
And I encourage folks to look up the lyrics to that song. It gets me every time. Born in the truck on the 4th of July. Anyway, it's a good song. But yeah, so we're going to have a guest, Valerie Query is going to join us. I asked her to do it because I thought she'd have a pretty interesting perspective because she's actually, I think she's a dual citizen of Canada and the U.S.
Nice.
Grew up in Canada, married to an Oklahoma boy.
Yeah. And
currently lives in the center of Oklahoma. So she's got a very multifaceted perspective.
Yeah, I always appreciated my, especially at OC where I went to college. A lot of my friends were either the TCKs, the missionary kids,
Third culture kids, yeah. But because their parents were missionaries, yep.
Or Canadians. I don't know if they were. I don't know if we have missionaries in Canada. I think they're
they're already nice enough.
Yeah, they're nice enough, or we gave up on them because we heard they're socialist. They're beyond lost. But always interesting to get that outside perspective because I forget that America is not the whole world.
Indeed,
it's just the best in the world.
Well, yeah, obviously, we had John Wayne.
Yeah,
and Jesus.
He better not be Canadian. That's always happening to my favorite American movie stars or singers.
Well, it seems like a lot of my favorite comedians for sure are Canadian.
They've got a good comedy scene up there.
Steve Martin is from Texas, though.
There you go. So we can turn them out as good as anyone.
So I wanted to. I came across a couple. I thought, on one hand, they're hilarious, and on the other hand, they're chilling, and on the other hand, they're just super interesting. So a couple quizzes.
All right.
That I wanted to. I sent you and had you go do them, and so one of them is, which denomination are you? And the other one is, what kind of Christian are you? And I thought this was apropos of the fact that I have officially, as of last week, sent my breakup letter to our church here in town. And so I'm a person without a church. Well, I've got a church, a person without a congregation.
Kingdom community, what are we calling it now these days?
Faith community? Kingdom community?
Did you say it's not you, it's me? Maybe we can get into that.
Not exactly. Yeah, we'll get to that later bit. But I thought this was kind of fun anyway. And I'll put the links in the show notes for everybody to look at them. So
I am always a fan of quizzes that tell me things about myself. It doesn't matter if it's like, what do you call it when it's hailing, when it's sunny outside or whatever. All of those quizzes are fun. I don't know if I've taken a quiz that I didn't like, which might mean I'm a narcissist. Like I just like to know about myself.
Well, do you learn things from them, or is it just validate what you already thought?
It just validates that I'm the best.
Well, we all know that, Nathan. Yeah. So we'll do the denomination one first, and then the what kind of Christian are you? So,
all right.
The which denomination are you? So, my caveats on all of this stuff is it's probably just like it's made up test.
Yep.
I don't know who put this together. I mean, it's like some Mike Hopkins, whoever that is.
We both got Scientologists for some reason. It's I don't know. Seems legit though.
Yeah. Be careful what you say about Scientologists, man.
I know.
So this one I thought it was pretty cool. There's a lot more nuance to it, and I'll just read the questions off. And so each one of them has question or statement, and then agree, disagree, no preference. And if you agree or disagree, then there's a slider for how low or high priority is, and there's like a 10-point scale.
Yes.
For the slider. So the questions are: there is one, or the statements, I should say. There is one God. The Godhead exists as three distinct persons: Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. The Bible is free from error. One must be a member of a specific church or organization to be saved. There's a whole lot of these. I'll stop reading them all because it could take forever. But
yeah, that's they're like theological statements,
right?
Yeah, that you.
Yeah.
How many questions were there total?
20, this one has 24.
24. Yeah. So plenty of things left out, but
oh yeah,
definitely lots of the big stuff.
Right. As long as it can put me in a box, I'll be happy. So this one I took it a few days ago. I think when I first sent this to you, Nathan, and I took it again today, and I got slightly different answers.
Okay.
And then I went back and I'm like, did I really mean that about this answer and this answer? And I like barely tweaked a couple, and I got back to the answers I had before. So,
interesting. That's funny.
I mean, it was very close anyway. The top 5 and the bottom 5 were about the same.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you want to share yours first? Or you want me to go first?
Yeah, I'll go. Okay. I thought I'll share my. So like I said, I like to take quizzes that tell me how awesome I am, and this is offensive to a specific group of people, and I realized that, but I felt really good that my bottom scoring one at 0% was Jehovah's Witness. I was like, yeah, I can.
Really?
I am maybe the opposite of a Jehovah's Witness. So again, apologies to, I guess, all the Jehovah's Witnesses, but dressing up in clothes, going door to door, not my jam.
No,
I like birthdays, that kind of thing. None of those were questions, but okay. So this was really interesting to me because I don't know if very many of my statements of agreement or disagreement to theological statements, if those have changed in the last maybe 2 or 3 years. Like if I took it pre-2020, I think I would have gotten very similar theological things, but I think how important I think each of those are has changed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So this, I liked that the slider was there. All right, here's my list. I'll enough preamble. Okay, my top 5. First, Seventh-day Adventist.
What percentage match?
100%.
100%?
I'm 100%. And I had to Google them because I don't think I know any Seventh-day Adventists. And, I mean, I can guess that they do things on Saturday based on the name.
Yeah.
They, from what I can gather, though, it's maybe, I'll have to look this up if it's similar to the Seventh-day Pentecostal that Nicole grew up in, our guest on the last book club episode, because they eat kosher, they follow Sabbath.
Seventh-day Adventists do?
That's what Wikipedia said. I don't know.
Wikipedia is never wrong.
Yeah. They encourage vegetarianism.
Huh.
So I don't know what. It's like the Brian Regan joke about accidentally saying the wrong thing in the eye doctor when he's like, this one or this one, this one, and you say it wrong and get these horrifying like Mr. McGee goggles. So I don't know what I got to get that one number 1, but there you go. Seventh-day Adventist at 100%. Then second was Episcopal, which makes sense because I read a lot of Anglicans, and I don't know.
Well, C.S.
Lewis, N.T. Wright, and probably a lot of other people that I like their stuff. Number 3, Methodist. And I can't remember if there was a subcategory of, or if it was just like the Methodist Church in America or something. I can't remember. I didn't Google them. Don't know anything about Methodism. 4, Evangelical Lutheran. I think there's one. I think I'm gonna have to start paying attention to these as I drive past them in town. And number 5, Presbyterian.
Presbyterian.
Yeah, and then I just because I grew up in the Church of Christ, Church of Christ ended up 15 for me out of 24, with 66%, which is still kind of high, but interesting because I think, for 10 years my theology hasn't been like maybe what strong, strict Church of Christ theology in North Texas would be, but I can abide 44% of disagreement apparently if it's where my parents go. So
yeah, so my top 5, and then we'll get to the bottom ones. I'm curious about that too. So I got 100% liberal Quakerism.
That's so funny to me.
I mean, of all things, I remember I took the same test about 5 years ago when I came across it. Liberal Quakerism, same thing.
Really?
Yeah, and I was surprised to get that again.
Yeah, that's just that. I have like a place in my heart for Quakers and Mennonites. For some reason, I just dig. I know there's lots of problems in those churches, like every church, but
sure,
there's just something I like about
yeah.
Hey, if you're gonna do something,
I mean that's old school stuff right there.
Exactly, I'm old school. That's why.
So yeah, I needed to do more research into what liberal. I'm not sure what liberal Quakerism is versus conservative Quakerism.
Do you get a drive? Because I wonder if it's not
so.
like that you're progressive, but maybe it's like,
Well, Quakers are not, like Mennonites are more in the direction of,
Amish.
Like Amish, yeah. But
am I mixing up Quakers and Amish in my mind?
Possibly. Quakers are, yeah, I should have looked that up a little bit more. But yeah, it's a bit different. I know that they're always well known for, a lot of times it's like primarily a female leadership.
What?
And it kind of always has been.
Interesting.
Yeah. But yeah, 100%. So, and then I got 97% Seventh-day Adventist as well.
Oh, there you go.
Which surprised me. And to me, the thing that always, that I really disagree with a lot of the Seventh-day Adventists is that they have a lot of emphasis on prophecy and the end times. And I've got a lot of issues with how that church was formed and leadership and stuff. But that's
I thought it was funny that I got 100% because I do think I would be extremely uncomfortable if I walked into a Seventh-day Adventist church.
Yeah, well, there's one right over by the police station here in town. It was pretty new one.
I feel like I ought to just do it just because of the quiz, just to see what happens.
Yeah, I'll see if there's a Quakers in town at all. I have no idea. And number 3 was Episcopal Anglican Church, 89. Mennonite, 89%, tie for 4th place. And I got Church of Christ, 5th place, 88%. So apparently I cannot abide 12%.
22, yeah, 12. Oh man, I'm bad at math, yeah. I got the math wrong both times, I just realized. 54 and 12.
Yep, and so my bottom one at 0%, I was kind of surprised by this, is Eastern Orthodox Church.
Oh no, that makes sense. I
don't know much about the Eastern Orthodox Church.
Yeah, I like it in theory. Yeah, I like it in theory, but I only know one
there's
person.
Lots of icons involved.
Yeah, it's like, yeah.
Is it the same as the Greek Orthodox Church?
It's the most similar to that than anything on the list. Yeah. They're the ones with Eastern Orthodox has the pretty big, like their leaders go to Jerusalem, maybe multiple times, but at least one time for this ceremony where they get like the eternal fire miraculously appears, and then they spread it, and then the eternal fire spreads to the churches, and they kind of keep it, like Olympic style,
Really?
They were extremely. The only reason I even know anything about them was during COVID. They were very, very militant about continuing to meet because meeting for them is so important. Like
Really?
Catholicism is too, right?
Yeah.
When there's a clergy, it's important for them to serve you the sacraments or whatever the kind of the holy things are that the clergy does that regular people don't do. But they like all kiss. They like all drink from the same silver cup or something when they take communion. And
Interesting.
so there was controversy about that. But I have a friend who I went to OC with that's like militant Eastern Orthodox, and so
Really? Always has been, or just is now?
no, he was converted.
Really? Huh.
Yeah, so
Fascinating. Yeah, so up from that, Roman Catholic and then Reformed churches. What are Reformed churches? That's the term I've never heard of.
gotta Google it. I mean, it's not the Reformation.
I don't think. Oh, maybe. And then up from that is Presbyterian and Mormonism at 30%. I'm not even sure I'd put Mormonism in this list, but yeah, whatever.
Well, I think it's interesting how close Mormonism and Church of Christ practical theology is, and
Oh yeah,
they're both American. They both came out of the same practically year for kind of the same reasons, and then just reflect very much the age that they came out of, which is modern thought. And then this is when, like Kellogg's were being made, so people weren't being inflamed by passion and eating spicy sausages and stuff, right? You wouldn't want.
Yeah, so, don't look up the history of cornflakes.
so this is when people are, trying to fight lust by eating boring food, and then this is when you get into, why Mormons won't have hot drinks and etc. because that was just what was considered, like the moral people on the edge of society then were doing that.
Yeah,
in many of the churches, and there are very interesting parallels as far as what became important to both churches, how we worship, how we meet, how we live. Very, very intriguing to me.
It's interesting. Yeah, I had a lot of Mormon friends growing up in school because they were the kids who didn't drink and didn't cuss, and
they I don't know if they sing a cappella, but they sing in harmony, and right, they really emphasize that.
I've got a high school friend who now, I think he's a part of the choir actually in the big temple in
Mormon
Tabernacle
Salt Lake
City.
Choir?
Yeah.
They're good. Yeah,
they're really good.
They're good at singing. Mormonism was second to last for me. Jehovah's Witness was 0%. I can't remember what percent Mormonism was. And then Unity Church, never heard of them.
Huh,
to the bottom.
Either way. Well, anyway, I thought it was fun to kind of go through that, and for a kid like me, who I've only been really exposed to the Churches of Christ my whole life, it was interesting. So the next one was where let me find the location of that. So that was on that. The first one was just like kind of this random, like
it's very sketchy looking, by the way.
Yeah, so many ads,
and it's kind of like the kind of website that is designed to trick you into clicking the wrong link. So there's all like get results now, which are not the result. They mean like get weight loss results. They don't mean that. So be careful.
So if you take the first quiz, scroll all the way to the bottom to the giant yellow button that says "Show me my results."
Yeah,
and
it was fun.
And if you get a virus on your computer, don't write us.
Yeah.
So this other one is on beliefnet.com. What kind of Christian are you?
I like this one. It's more people friendly. It's like, well, UX design is good.
Yeah.
And the questions were interesting.
So yeah, the questions are a lot. They made me think a lot more because they're it's less yes or no and importance.
Yeah.
I'm not going to read them because they're really long, but there's 21 questions on this one, I think. But I had no idea what to expect. The intro is like, what kind of Christian are you? Does your faith resemble Joel Osteen, Billy Graham, Bishop Sponge? Is that how you say it? Sponge?
Oh, that's a good spong.
All I could think is please don't let it be Joel Osteen. I mean, I was worried about that. Too bad. But yeah, as long as it wasn't that.
I got Jesus. What did you get?
Well, yeah, I got Jesus too.
Yeah, perfect. That's why we've got the podcast together, because we have it figured out.
So I went through all of the questions, and I came up with, your result is a Brian McLaren Christian. Who's Brian McLaren?
I don't know. So that's so funny. I was wondering if we were going to get the same one. I also got Brian McLaren, and then I was like, man, I don't like that I don't know who that is, because it might be Joel Osteen for all I know. So,
well,
and
the description helped.
I specifically remember, what's the movement? Oh no, I got to Google him again. Brian McLaren. Emerging Church. He has some kind of association with the emergent church, and I remember that being a swear word. I don't even know what it is, but I remember that that's not good. So
McLaren's also associated with postmodern Christianity.
Yeah, I don't know what that is either.
That just means he's a liberal nut job.
Yeah, so it did help. I assume that the rest of this was the same. So Brian McLaren Christian, and then it said like Rob Bell, which I feel like there's a pre and a post. It depends on what year Rob Bell, you know.
Exactly.
So don't hold that all the way against us. Although I don't know. I'm one of the books. Rob Bell, Phyllis Tickle, which sounds like Bart Simpson would call that in as a fake name to Mose. Does anyone Phyllis Tickle? I need a Phyllis Tickle. Anyways, but she wrote this fantastic. I don't know anything about her, but when I finished with by Sky Jitani, he had further reading resources, and Phyllis had, I don't know, Mrs. Tickle has I feel weird saying it now, has this thing called the Divine Hours, which are pre-written prayers for the day and the time of the day, and it's just awesome. I used this for maybe a year after I read with, so I don't know who she is, but I like her. N.T. Wright, so Tim Keller, which I'm definitely a Tim Keller fan.
I'm on board with that.
Eugene Peterson, I don't know who that is.
I don't know much about him.
I don't know.
And then and it says, you subscribe to Sojourners Irrelevant? I'm like, yes and yes.
I laughed when it said The Atlantic, because it was like, yeah, you subscribe to Sojourners Irrelevant, but more likely Rolling Stone, Paste, and The Atlantic. Yeah. And I thought that was pretty funny. I always like articles that I find in The Atlantic. I don't subscribe to it, but I feel seen. I feel known.
Christian history is rooted in St. Francis, who leads through Gandhi to Mother Teresa and Martin Luther King Jr. Okay.
I don't know anything about St. Francis.
He's the guy who talked to the animals, right?
Is he? Good.
I like Francis that one. Of Assisi.
Okay.
Yeah. He was like all about peace and nonviolence and like loving people or something weird.
And I feel like he started a very, very popular order of monks.
Yeah, right.
Right? Oh, Franciscans.
Yeah,
right. Yeah. Okay.
Mother Teresa and Martin Luther King Jr., I'm okay with those. You emphasize social justice as an element of God's kingdom. You might be emergent or progressive, but you're probably post-evangelical. It's like they're reading my emails.
I know. Yeah. I'd be interested. It's too bad we didn't, we only have one example, so we don't know what other options there are. But
yeah, I'd be curious to hear what other people come up with.
Yeah. This kind of reminds me. I stumbled on this thing. I told you about this the other day, but I stumbled on, in my secret Twitter that I have, mostly just to listen to the world, this thing called Weird Christian Twitter, which apparently is a thing. And then I found a book club, and there was a discussion that was going to start soon, and I just joined it and ended up talking to these people on Zoom for maybe 4 hours.
Wow.
First, it was listening to an author talk about their book. It was a book club, and I hadn't read the book, so I felt kind of guilty about that. But they were from all over the country, mostly American, but also not all American. Every age, every denomination, but all of these people who were had the same 2020 as I did. It was it just filled me up. It was just
really?
So life-giving to. It's kind of I don't know, the hurting people that there's a handful in every church. That's kind of what I felt like, So they are the strong minority, and they kind of feel a little crazy, or the only people they have to talk to are their work friends or something.
Yeah.
It was like if you went to a church and it was just those people, but there was 100 of them. And so you could just tell that all of us had been thirsty for spiritual fellowship.
Yeah.
It was amazing. So I'm going to try to find out how in the world, I don't know how to find it or exactly what it was, but this kind of goes along with the quest for denominations or just the quiz, how important it is to remember that we're not alone going through this stuff, and that God is working in some crazy ways, and the importance of ending up talking with other Christians. It was amazing.
Yeah.
So,
well, I'm really glad you got to do that, because that's the biggest struggle. I think that, and we've discussed this, but it's one of the biggest struggles to me. Not having a faith community or kingdom community or whatever congregation whatever you want to say, is just the lack of consistent community and just being able to share your questions and concerns with other people. I mean, that's partly why we're doing this podcast, but we've got our families and things like that. But it's affirming in a lot of ways, and it's hopefully challenging in other ways too, to have that around you. So, and I've talked to some people who have done the deconstruction thing, and they tore it down to the foundation, and then tore up the foundation and walked away.
Yeah.
And they've found community other places, and I'm glad they've found community, but I don't want to go so far that I lose even that.
Man, I think I would say in this group, some of the people probably would have been described themselves that way.
Yeah.
They deconstructed and they're out. But that's one of the things that made it so life-giving is they were back in the conversation in this group because it was all the people with the same exact pain.
Yeah.
With all these varying levels of where they are at the moment, but it was so refreshing to have room for that pain and room for those doubts and room for everything else. It was all there, and it was going to church, only there are no eggshells to step on. Like you don't have
was that
to.
what it was? That you just felt like you were free to say anything about anything and ask any question you wanted? Was it that kind of freedom, or what?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was the biggest thing. Was it was just there's no pretense, or nobody was trying to be like anything. Nobody's trying to fit in. None of us had the same anything. The only thing we had in common was basically how we had grown up, and then like that it matters very much to us, right? So
like the very, very basics of faith.
Yeah, and just I think it's also just the people who have gone through this specific American 2020 reckoning that the church is seeing, and that Christians are seeing. That happened at a time when you not only are you not having that community with your church because of a pandemic, but you're also just not. I mean, you're not going to coffee shops with people either. So I think it was also just pent up desire for community.
Just a lack of connection for so long.
Yeah, by everyone.
Yeah, I was just talking to some folks from our church a couple days ago. It's from previous church now, and I found it strangely difficult to try to describe how and why 2020 made so many people start rethinking things. I mean, I had no problem just like saying that. But they just seemed to not quite understand what I was getting at. Like, why would that make you rethink things? Like, what, why wouldn't you be rethinking things already? Or, but so it's nice to be able to find some people that understand kind of where you're going through. It's like a support group, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and you're totally. That reaction does not surprise me because I think the majority of people did not go through what I went through.
Yeah. Oh, it's definitely not a majority.
Yeah, so
it's more than you'd expect, but
maybe we're the 20% or who knows what. But the 80% I think had difficulty in 2020 like everyone did with life, but that it wasn't a scales falling off the eyes kind of thing or I think that the two kinds of people that were sitting next to pews with each other that were very similar, maybe 66% similar or 88% similar, and then the 20% or some minority of people like us saw things that other people just didn't experience.
Yeah.
It's like a tornado. It's like in Oklahoma how tornadoes go through, I don't know, Del City usually. And you'll see like just a house that is reduced to the ground. I've never understood this. And then there will be like a completely unfazed house right next to it. Mm-hmm. Like, what tornado? I don't know what you're talking about. It's almost like that. Like, I'm not crazy. Like, there's no house here. You didn't see that storm? They're like, what storm? We're fine. Yeah. You mean the rain last night? I was asleep. So right. It's almost like
I didn't feel it, so it didn't happen.
Yeah, and my strong desire that I think is impossible is to be able to communicate in a way that the majority of people can understand that. I think that has contributed to the gulf or the chasm or whatever is.
Yeah.
It's so hard to, like you said, it's so hard to even explain it to someone, and it would feel so good for someone whose house had no tornado just to be like, oh wow, yeah, I see that, or something like that. But that doesn't seem to be that's not the default reaction, which is frustrating. I don't know what to do about that, but I've thought about that a lot this week, especially, but just in the last year, like my strong desire to like convey what is happening to church leadership or to pastors who are kind of in scramble mode or defense mode, or just the same thing that's always happened. And I think I talked about this before, but I remember when people left our church and it was either not discussed or it was a problem with that person.
Yeah.
Like a moral failing, or like they always were this, or they never were quite as Christian as us. And I've had that in jobs. I had a job, my first job out of college. Just releasing some stress there from that.
Thinking about it?
Yeah, just from thinking about it. It makes me really sad. And I fantasize about like calling an elder and saying like, hey, if you want to know, I'll tell you. Like I'll tell you what's going on if you want to know. But you gotta want to know.
Yeah.
That's not gonna happen. But that's just my my fantasy world. Anyways, first job out of college, I was very naive. It was a group of like 15 people, so the size of The Office, the TV show The Office, and it was dramatic like that, and it was crazy. And there was always yelling, like when things went wrong, and name calling, and we stayed really late working all the time, and
wow.
It was just always anger and stuff. And I remember very early on hearing about people who had been fired or who had quit, and they all had these stories about him. There was like crazy Asa was this guy who had all these problems, and then there was like this guy who was nuts and lazy, and so I heard these stories about these employees who had left the company, and they were always just in like this strong negative light. And I worked there for 3.5 years or 3 years. And I had a friend quit because he was tired of being yelled at.
Yeah.
And he was kind of like the office scapegoat. So when something went wrong, he would get yelled at. And the same thing happened. They just started talking about him like that. I was like, wait a minute. We all know him. He's awesome. Like he's the coolest. He is the best person here. But and so then I started to realize like, oh, those other people probably are like regular people too.
Yeah.
I just bought into the thing, and then I quit. I quit that company, and the same thing happened instantly. It was
demonized.
Yeah. I quit, and then I got fired after I quit. And
what?
Yeah. So I
how does that work?
I quit. I didn't show up for 3 months, and they sent me a letter that said you're fired. So I was like, well, it's like I break up with you. Well, no, you can't break up with me because I'm breaking up with you first. It was kind of like that. But
wow,
I realized like they cannot handle the idea that they had some problems.
Mm-hmm.
And so the story they tell themselves about who they are had to involve that they were okay. So they started with that. We are good as a company. Yep. We're fine. So if someone has a problem with us, then it's their problem. They have a problem with them as a person. And I internalized that. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, and it just to kind of expand on that, it's this feeling of, if I admit that person was great and they left, that means there's maybe something wrong with me.
Yeah.
And so if I demonize them, that means I'm great and they're the loser, or they're the dangerous one.
And in this company, it was a toxic company. Like that's how you describe the culture there. And one of the problems is because it's everything or nothing. Like it's like they could either believe we are fantastic, or if someone thinks we're not fantastic, then does that mean we're terrible? Like they couldn't stomach those in between things of, yeah, we've got some stuff to work on. What should we work on next? And that happens in toxic companies, and I think toxic companies are not the majority. I've worked for several places after that there's bad managers and there's always problems, but I've never worked somewhere as toxic as that. And the healthier the company is that I've worked for, the more they are asking employees, what can we do better? What are the problems? And the more it's okay with saying those things out loud as a leader and saying, we know we're not doing this as good as we could be. That's like what I look for in a company. I think it's easier for companies to do that than churches. And it seems like from that group of 100 hurt people that I Zoomed with, and just from kind of stories that people have been sharing, I think that churches tend to fall more in the same category as that company that I left, where not necessarily that they're toxic, like they're yelling at each other all the time, but when someone leaves, I think it's more important that churches get things right because salvation is at stake, and it's bigger than just a paycheck. It's bigger than just the economy. And so I think because people feel like the stakes are high, I think the idea of having a problem is more threatening.
Yeah, both of the big boy jobs I've had in my adulthood since we moved back from Germany, both corporations, they both have the fairly standard practice in America at least, where if someone quits to go someplace else, they have an exit interview, right? Mm-hmm. And the exit interview usually consists of, partly like, hey, sorry to see you go. What are you going to do next? But the key points that I think are important to ask in that exit interview when an employee leaves is, why are you leaving? And what do you think we could do better? What could we have done to keep you? Those kinds of things. Yeah. And I'm sure that there are some churches out there that do that, but I've yet to come across a church who seems to take any interest in someone who leaves. It seems like when someone leaves, I mean, I'm obviously broad generalizations here because the church is not like a single person, but the leadership tends to not seem to be curious at all. They seem to like, well, I guess they've gone off the deep end, or well, I guess they're gone. We're never going to get them back, and they just move on. Whereas the reason companies ask for that exit interview is to figure out, what are we doing wrong? What's the hang up? What's the problem? And when churches don't do that, and I understand why they don't do that, because most churches are more comfortable thinking that they're doing it all right already, and they've got it figured out. Because if you don't have some of that mindset that you've got it figured out and there's nothing more for you to figure out, then you can maybe be perceived as wishy-washy or not stable. And leaderships want to appear stable. At least male leaderships do. And
that's a good point.
Yeah, and so if you start asking people who leave, is there something we could have done differently? Then that implies that maybe you're doing something wrong. But it also just, to me, shows a lack of humility to think that you've got it figured out and that you are not willing to ask any questions at all. Just kind of, well, dust your feet off and move along to the next person, I guess. And it's really sad.
Yeah, and I don't need an actual exit interview, because I could see that going really bad also. Yeah. Definitely hear some horror stories about kind of bully-ish leaders of churches, but man, I wish the internal questions were happening. Like at least be curious internally. Even if you're not going to extend an olive branch of peace and say, hey, let's talk. You know, we want to learn from this.
Yeah.
That's asking a lot. I think we're, from my story, my family story, and a lot of people, I have a lot of firsthand accounts that there are no churches doing this. So I would just like to say, like, no churches are doing this, so that somebody can be like, no, you're wrong, and tell me their experience where somebody did do this, because I that would give me a lot of hope that happens.
Well, we even got we've received emails from people all around the country who listen to the podcast, and I mean the experiences range from total silence to, one person said that they left the church to go to a different church, and after they had left, the eldership excommunicated them.
Yeah, it's the exact same thing.
They sent out a letter. They sent out a letter to the congregation saying, "Do not have any contact with this person and this family anymore, because they have left the fold," basically. And that included this person's in-laws.
Oh.
And now the in-laws have no contact with the grandkids anymore because the eldership wrote this nasty letter. What do you mean? What happened to you?
No, I mean, that's what happened in my company, my toxic company.
Oh, in your company.
Yeah.
I guess
they excommunicated me. And I know there are churches out there that there's all kinds of reasons for why this is happening, but I think it's happening a lot of places, and I think it has been for a while, but definitely now. But I think there's a lot of leaderships of churches that when certain people leave, it's a relief. Like, oh, thank God they are gone, you know? Like, the exit interview would be a party if it was going to be anything, because people don't leave. I mean, people leave for all kinds of reasons, but many people leave over years and years and years and years of built up hesitancy and issues. I don't remember what you said the average was. It was like 7 years that someone who is deconstructing would stay in their church on average before they leave. So during that time, there's for certain kinds of leadership styles or teaching styles or churches, that's going to represent kind of a nuisance a little bit.
Yeah. And
I remember when I quit, my boss had been screaming at my face.
Wow.
I mean, I quit on the spot, and he was screaming at my face because a few days before that, I had been screamed in the face by another boss. And I went home crying. Actually, my brother picked me up. I was crying and I couldn't drive, And I was like, why would I put up with this? And then I started thinking, like, wait a minute, is this what like normal jobs are like? Or, is this, because it was my only experience.
Sure.
And I came to the conclusion, like, surely this is not normal. So I wrote a letter and I sat on it over the weekend. Who knows how immature the letter was, but I tried to moderate it. And I just said, I think this is not professional. I can't put up with this. And I just don't think this is how an office should be run. And I'm not willing to work under these conditions, and something needs to change. So that's the letter I wrote, and came into the yelling boss on Monday, who had gotten the letter and just reacted against it. And when I quit, his physical demeanor relaxed. He smiled, and he was like back to friendly. And I realized I had just lifted a burden off of his shoulders. He was facing this challenge to the way things were. He also was a foreigner, and a stereotype of Americans is that we are litigious and we sue the pants off of each other. So I suspect he thought that, I was writing a letter in preparation for a lawsuit, which I wasn't. And so I quit, and now he wasn't, liable anymore. But so it's like the worst possible place I could imagine working was this place. It was crazy. And some of the stories
horrible
would be hard even to believe, except for the four of us that all quit. But what's so disappointing is that the church should be so much better than this. and the leadership of it, like, not, I think just the people in the pews should be better at this. And I was guilty of that, because when people left, I assumed that their faith was weak, or they, when, I don't know, women were talking about women's roles, that they were just, power hungry and had a chip on their shoulder. I've thought that before. Yeah. Or they go somewhere with instrumental worship, which we didn't have in the Church of Christ, and so they're diluting the faith, and just being like, I had all these, I made up sitting in the pews as a 14-year-old, all these reasons why these people must have left. So I guess I wasn't doing better, but I still am disappointed that the leadership, who we call shepherds or pastors or elders, like, the whole idea is to gently lead a group of people in the right direction.
Yeah.
And I've worked for such great managers, bosses, who will gently lead me. Like, when I do have a problem, when I do have a chip on my shoulder, or when I have a personal failing, my bosses, like the mediocre ones to the good ones, have all shepherded me and worked on me and had hard conversations with me. And sometimes they just say good job or whatever. But I have in my mind, I have a higher standard for what, so if my earthly, if my worldly boss cares about my person, cares about my life, like, not just my contribution or whatever. I have bosses that, like, when I left, 5 years ago, the last place I worked to this place, my boss was like, rats. Okay. And he said, was there, could we pay you more? Was there something we could do? And I said, honestly, it's just a good opportunity for me, And he's like, I get that. You should do that.
Sure.
So it felt great. And then we have the prodigal son and Jesus as our examples for, like, how should Christians react to this kind of thing? Mm-hmm. And somehow we've turned it into the excommunication thing, which is a crazy misunderstanding of Scripture, in my opinion.
Oh, my word, yeah.
And just the least Jesus-like thing I can think of, especially in that circumstance. But the father in the story of the prodigal son represents God, and the son says, I wish you were dead, I want out of here, and also give me some money. And the father is sad and gives him that money, and then waits expectantly for him. And then when he comes back, he welcomes him. Or when Jesus says, literally talks about this thing happening and says, let's say you have 100 sheep and one wanders off. You would think that the next verse says, never that sheep is dead to you. Don't worry, you've got 99. Focus on the 99. Or you would think that it says, that sheep was a wolf all along. It would have followed your voice and it's wandered off. That's not what the verse says.
No.
So where are we getting the example for how to react? I think we're getting it from toxic work culture. I don't know what else. What else explains that? It's sad. It hurts. It hurts me really deep down, because we're talking in this case about a specific, like, literal people that we've both known for 30 years, but it's the same exact story at every church that I hear from people. The high profile, Russell Moore, Beth Moore. It's happening, like, it doesn't matter who they were.
Yeah.
It tends to result in an ad hominem angry reaction or silence. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and like I said at the very beginning of this episode, this past a week ago yesterday, we wrote a letter, took some time on our vacation, of course, because that's what you do. You stretch yourself out on vacation, apparently. Wrote a letter to our to the elders and the leadership at our church, and breakup letter, saying we're moving on, and here's why. There are more things than we just listed in the email, But the reactions we've gotten have been all over the board. I also, after letting it sit for a while, for several days, and having spent some time with one of the leaders there, after we kind of let it sit for a little bit, I went ahead and put it on our Facebook wall. Honestly, just because we have so many people around the world who are so tied into the Churches of Christ, and we have so many people at the church here in town who we love and want to keep relationships with. And I wanted to communicate what's going on. I mean, It wasn't a church bashing thing. It wasn't a look how horrible these people are or whatever. It was just to let people know what was going on, because there's no way we could talk to everybody that we need to talk to. And so I've had angry responses, like friends who just blew up at me, and later who apologized. I had a friend just apologized today for blowing up at me, which was nice. It still hurts. Had a guy that I haven't talked to I went to Bible college with him. I haven't talked to him in like 20 years. And he sent me this long message on Facebook about how sad it is that Christians these days are just rolling over and accepting what the society wants them to do.
Sure.
And becoming relativistic. And I wrote him back, and I'm like, I love you, dude, but that hurts because, first of all, we haven't talked in 20 years. And you're also assuming that the beliefs that I have and the stances that I have taken are not something that I have studied through blood, sweat, and tears, and thought about and prayed about and discussed with people, and it's been hard. It's not some like decisions we just willy-nilly came to. And so, but then there's been a lot of people who've been very, very supportive. Like, sorry to see you go, but we love you and we'll keep in touch with you as much as possible. So it's been all the way across the board. But so it's been a stressful week. Writing the email was apparently so stressful. So I have multiple sclerosis, and one of the symptoms is my upper body is slightly numb, and my left side is slightly numb all the time, and like maybe 10% numb. And one thing about MS is that when you are in stressful situations, or in like maybe even physically stressful situations, like a lot of heat or whatever, the symptoms can get bad again. And I was sitting there in this room in Breckenridge, Colorado. It's beautiful outside, sunny and all peaceful, writing this painful letter. And my right arm just went completely numb. I was like, what? Like my thumb felt like I'd been sleeping on it, and I couldn't feel it at all. And my whole arm. So I had to like stop and kind of go do something relaxing, and it calmed down again, and I could feel my hand. And then came back to Fort Collins to pick up our dog and talk to my parents about this, who were equally unhappy, and which was a hard conversation, because, as mentioned before, we've been in this. My parents were the first couple married in this congregation here in town, and it's been a very big part of our life for my whole life and their whole lives. So, and in that conversation with them, my arm went numb again. I'm like, sure, I need to not talk to people about this for a while. It's just, I'm okay right now, so don't worry about it.
Man.
But the stress and the pain and the difficulties are hard. And my wife was just asking me before we started recording this episode tonight, she's like, how are you feeling about it? Because she knew what we were going to talk about. And I said, well, the first thing that popped in my head was conflicted. And by conflicted, I didn't mean that I was second guessing or rethinking things, but I guess it's more of a, I feel like we've made the right decision. And in some ways I feel a lot freer. I feel like I can be more open and I can be myself. I can be more honest with people about what I believe and who I am in a lot of ways. But the relationships that are going to be damaged are, I just wish there was some magical pill that I could take to, which was it, the blue or the red pill?
Red pill. Oh, yeah. You want the blue pill, maybe. The blue pill is back to happy Matrix land where...
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I might have gotten that backwards.
Yeah, you know what I mean. But I wish there was some magic wand or something that I could do to disconnect the friendships with the fundamentalism that I'm trying to get away from. And for some friends, there are some people who are going to be just fine, and we're going to have continued relationships with. But there are some people who will not, and I think I'll be fine with my family. I'm not worried about having a broken relationship with my family or anything. It'll be hard to get through some things, but it's just the other relationships that are going to be hard to get past, I guess.
I think I'm glad we're talking about this because I think it's in this moment where you made a decision and you don't know, like you could have done this in many different ways. You could have made a lot of different decisions, right? And that's where like a lot of the people listening to this are, and it's fresh, so that's when it's like the most painful and the most uncertain. Like who knows where this is going to go? But I feel like we're kind of the test case of leaving loud versus leaving quietly.
Yeah.
Is it maybe Jamar Tisby that's been advocating leaving loud when you've got racism in your church? He says don't leave quietly, tell them why. Leave loud. That's what it means. And I am an avoidant for, I don't know how I ended up this way. Probably no one actually describes me this way except for myself. But I see myself as like a very avoidant, cautious person as far as like upsetting people's opinions. I feel like I'm tiptoeing all the time. Maybe I just have very strong wheat man opinions. And so just like this is the regulated version of it, but to everyone else it probably seems like I'm extremely opinionated. But I left completely silently. I didn't leave. Like in it, right. in my mind or in the elders' minds or in a pastor's mind or whatever, we can all just pretend what we want to believe the way that I did it.
Yeah.
Which means I'm living in kind of the avoidant kind of relationship, like we mentioned a while back, like if a husband and wife never talked about problems.
Yep.
Like anytime there was a problem, you just decided that's just one less thing that you're going to address in your life. And you just...
Well, we can't talk about that subject anymore.
Well, guess we got to throw away the dishwasher. So that I'm living that life. Nobody has gotten angry at me. So there's that. But I have all this pent-up desire, like I said, to I want to say something and it get through. Like, I just want so bad to be able to communicate my perspective, not and even convince them. I just want them to see my perspective. I don't care if they disagree with it or hold to their own. That's what I'm frustrated about. But I have it's all undealt with, and there's zero chance that anything would change out of it because there's no pain, And leaving loud, at least, first of all, I think you did I know, there's all kinds of reasons to sweep things under the rug, and sometimes there's a good time to do that, probably. But the reactions that I saw to your public post on Facebook, I think a lot of people were encouraged. Some people were encouraged that are staying at that church. Yeah. So that they're not alone. Some people were encouraged because of people commented that got hurt 10 or 15 years ago. And when I think about that company that I left, when I finally connect with someone, because we all got fired or quit at different times and thought ill of each other because of what we had been told, but when we've gotten together, it is so life-giving to just realize, like, oh, okay, we all went through this crazy company together, but we're not like broken, toxic people like the company rewrote our story, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing that Christy and I tried really hard to do when we wrote this letter, is to try to... We kind of wanted to leave loud, but not leave yelling, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because if you have a disagreement with somebody, which happens once in a while, it's fine to have disagreements and have different opinions about things. And honestly, in my opinion, opinions about the Bible are fine in a lot of ways. It kind of flies against the narrative that I feel like we were brought up with, that everything's black and white. But I think there are a lot of things, and even some of the things that I mentioned in the letter, we feel strong enough about them to leave a church. I understand that there are people who have different views on those things, or haven't yet come to the understanding that I have, or have a different take on it. I mean, I know that there's a lot of differences, but we were trying to leave in such a way to say, these things are important, and this is something that we believe in, therefore we can't be here anymore. But at the same time, not make people mad. And because if you yell at people, they're not going to listen to you. Sadly, obviously, some people felt like we were yelling at them when we weren't yelling at them. Some people told us they felt judged and felt slapped in the face, and exactly what you predicted.
I told you. I can't remember exactly how I said it, but it's sad. But there's all kinds of psychology that I don't know going into that thing. I'm trying to remember what I even said. I think it's the identity thing. So
yeah,
because I've read your letter. It was public, and you didn't say this leader has it wrong. You didn't say this person is mean. You didn't say I don't like the tone in this building. It was all completely whatever the opposite of ad hominem is. Ad hominem is against the man. These were all just like beliefs that you had come to about what your priorities are as a Christ follower, right. And where you want to go as a family. So it very much was, in some ways, it's us, not you. Like, hey, we have found these things, so that's what we're looking for now. More than, it's like you were following a carrot out more than talking about sticks that were pushing you out.
Right.
Man, I'm mixing so many metaphors right now. But that was the letter. It was, hey, there's some carrots that we feel it's important for us to follow, so we're going to follow.
Right.
But the way that people reacted, well, what I told you I thought was going to happen is that people will take that, and because they tie their identity so close into being correct about things, mm-hmm. but also just maybe that specific body, a specific body, it feels to them like you did just slap them in the face. Mm-hmm. And because there's no tolerance for, like there's a range of belief that is okay to have, it's like, no, I'm either right or I'm wrong. And this all goes into, I said it more eloquently when I texted it to you. I can't remember what I said, but it results in people attacking your person angrily. Not the stance that you took, but like what you must be saying between the letters, what your intent is, what the state of your soul is.
Well, and one of the things you said is that actually helped me a great deal was you said, remember, these responses you're getting are pathos. They're not ethos or logos. They are, like you said, their identity. They are fully based on, I am this identity. you are saying that you don't want to be part of that identity, therefore you don't want to be part of me, and I'm a bad person, and I'm slapped in the face, and I'm going to go to hell, or who knows me.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like a snowball.
Right.
And when you have that feeling, and you have the mindset that there's only one way to do something, I totally understand the angry response. I mean, it makes sense. I don't like it. It still hurts, but I understand where it's coming from.
Yeah. And it's also sad to me just how predictable it is, because we've been listening to stories of people going through this one after another after another. And the reasons people leave are different. The ways that people leave are different. But man, the responses seem to be so uniform. So that's one of the sad things is like, it's not that I know the leaders so well of this church that I know exactly what they were going to think. It's just that I've seen the pattern so much. I'm like, yeah, I know what's happening.
It's a people thing. It's not this
Yeah,
congregation or that congregation. It's just how people react.
Yeah, and it's not even, I don't even think it's like individual failings. It's more like the system was set up for people to react this way.
Oh, that's a good point.
Because otherwise you would not see it repeated so consistently. And that makes me sad, because I think of the system as, infused with the Spirit. We're not talking about a bad corporate culture. We're talking about a group of people who are trying to follow God, and I would expect their reactions to be like the best company in the world, not those kind of few toxic companies that are out there.
Yeah. Well, I know that there's a lot of people listening to this podcast who are kind of in the same, more or less, position that we are, or close to it. We've got a lot of emails from people, and so I want to kind of to close things out. I want to go ahead and read the letter that we wrote, because we've had. I know when I was trying to put this together, I was looking for letters that other people wrote to give me ideas, right? And so maybe this will help somebody. Not that this is the right way to do things, but if we, like I said, we tried our best to try to get across a message, but be loving and maintain relationships.
When you say we, you mean you and your wife.
Yeah.
Not you and I. I am still avoiding.
Yes.
I'm completely avoidant.
It was me and my wife, and then I read it to the kids, and they're like, you better put our names on the letter too.
Oh, nice. So, they signed all right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. That's brave. More power.
And, I've redacted the name of the church, but you can figure it out if you want, but I don't want. It's not necessarily about this congregation. It's just, you'll figure it out. The past year has been crazy, hard, and strange for all of us. Pandemic has forced us to make adjustments and accommodations we never dreamed of. When it came to church-related things, those accommodations tended to be particularly difficult, especially the forced distance from our church family. But like many others I've come across lately, that unwelcome distance gave us a lot of time to step back and look at a life from a different perspective. It's a lot like a long sabbatical from almost everything. Most people come back from sabbaticals having made some big life changes, and that's definitely true of us. The biggest change for us is that we have decided to move on from our current church and search for a different faith community yet to be determined. This was not an easy or quick decision to come to, nor was it made out of anger or bitterness. We love and we feel greatly loved by our church family, and that has not changed. And we intend to maintain relationships with our brothers and sisters whenever possible. We have, however, come to the difficult conclusion that our beliefs and the direction we feel God is leading us no longer connect with our current church or any of the, quote, churches of Christ that we are aware of at this time. Here's some explanation. When asked what the most important commandment in Scripture was, Jesus answered, "The most important one is this: Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is this: love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these." A church that loves God is not hard to find. Seldom have I encountered any kind of church which does not truly and deeply love God. It's when it comes to what it means to love your neighbor that we have reached an impasse. To our family, loving our neighbor means standing by people of color as they fight for justice and loudly proclaiming with them that Black Lives Matter, until the world no longer needs to be reminded of that fact. Loving our neighbor means doing away with the patriarchal traditions which keep women silent and separate in our churches and allowing all of God's children to be truly co-heirs with Christ. Loving our neighbor also means loving and affirming those in our LGBTQ+ community so that they know that God loves them and does not reject them for who they are. Since loving our neighbor is so vitally important to Jesus, we feel that our relationship with God hinges upon doing likewise. These views have, to different degrees, not been encouraged or even accepted by our current faith community. Therefore, we long to be a part of a church that will allow us to show that kind of love to others, unencumbered by tradition and preconceived notions of what is truly important to God. I would also like to emphasize that we are in no way, shape, or form leaving the church or leaving the faith. The church is a much broader and more expansive thing than we often admit. All those who belong to Christ are part of His church, wherever they may be, and I'm thankful that our faith through this process has become stronger, not weaker. We feel closer to God, not more distant. And please remember that we will always be your brothers and sisters in Christ, regardless of the name on the door we walk through on Sunday morning. And then grace and peace to you in Jesus Christ, and we sign our names. That was actually kind of hard to read just now.
It's a big deal.
Yeah. It is. Like I said, I'm glad that we did it. I think especially the positions that we were in at our church as far as being in leadership and being so extremely involved that we were, I didn't want to leave a question about what we were doing or where we were going or, what we were thinking. So anyway,
whew.
Not that we have it figured out. I want to reemphasize that again in case anybody from church is listening. I'm not saying that we've got it figured out. I'm trying to be humble as possible. I'm trying to be open and willing to learn and willing to let God guide us in different ways and try to follow where He wants us to go.
How would you rate your response to the letter, maybe out of 10 stars, and we can see if a listener wrote a better letter that went over better?
How did rate my response, or how rate my own letter?
The response, because mine is 0 stars because no letter and no response.
I was rating the response that I get from other people. From the church.
Yeah. Let me redact the question.
Rephrase that.
If you knew everything you know today, and you went back a week ago, would you have changed anything about what you did so far?
No.
There you go.
Not.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So 10 stars?
That's 10. Yeah, that's 10 stars.
Yeah. The only thing I would have done is talked to a few people about it earlier.
Okay.
Kind of ease some people into it.
You think the surprise led to the heat of the reaction?
Yeah, I think part of it was the surprise. Because we were that family that was never going to leave.
Yeah,
We had our spot on the second row in the center, and that was never going to be anybody else's spot.
Which is the same thing as the first row. So
the first row is a buffer row.
Yeah, the first row is for someone to put the preacher to put his coffee.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
I don't think you can overemphasize how involved you and your family have been for generations, but just you and Christy, like somehow you weren't being paid, but you're practically staff,
Yeah.
Yeah,
and like I said, I think if we had, so in our minds, this was like a slow boil for a year,
right,
or simmer, but to a lot of other people, it was just a sudden explosion out of nowhere.
Yeah,
and so
that makes sense.
That's the only thing I would have done differently. I wouldn't have changed the letter in any way. I think it's exactly what we wanted to say. And there are more issues that they didn't want to get into that were really more of opinion than anything. But yeah, so we'll, next steps once my son gets his last vaccination on Saturday. So a couple weeks from
Find the liberal Quakers.
Yeah. Find the liberal Quakers. See where we go from here.
Yeah, it's the new frontier. It's like being in
Right.
space without a spaceship.
I just hope we don't die of dysentery along the way.
Yeah. I never made it. I didn't even make it to Wyoming ever.
Really? It's been so
Never.
long since I've played that.
I always like killed people as I was treating them. I think I was too young to be playing this game. But because they'd give you like multiple choice, and I assumed that like I'd be like, yeah, rub salt in the wound. That's got to be the right answer at some point, and it never was.
Oh wow! Now I'm going to have to go find that and download it again.
Yeah.
Oregon Trail.
I think I accidentally downloaded it taking that denomination quiz.
Well, maybe we should get off the line before your computer infects my computer.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for sharing that. I
Yeah.
know it's raw still, but
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of value in that. I think you're not the only one.
Yep. For sure. Maybe in the future we can get some stories from other folks who are going through the same thing,
Yeah.
and hear from other people how their experiences have been different or the same or something in between. Be interesting. All right. Well, talk to you later, man.
All right. Thanks, Steve.
All these messages I thought you wanted to hear, but it only takes a whisper.
Hey, thanks for listening to Following the Fire. If you'd like to see show notes for this episode, which includes links to everything we mentioned as well as all the scriptures, head on over to followingthefire.com and just click on this episode. There's also contact information on the website. Let us know what you think about the show and if you have any suggestions for future topics. Also, please give us a review on Apple Podcasts if you could. It really helps other folks find the show. And as always, thanks to the fabulous Daniel Wheat for the theme song and the music for the episode. You can find more of his stuff on Apple Music and Spotify. See you later.